Off the ball. This is News Talk.
Yet more World Cup heartbreak for Ireland, beaten by the All Blacks 46-14 in Tokyo. We're going to have a reaction from the Irish camp within the next hour. We'll talk to Zinzan Brooke and Keith Wood as well. You're listening to Saturday's Off the Ball. Nathan with you through till 5 o'clock. Later in the hour, we'll have all the team news from the day's Premier League, where Everton still lead West Ham by 1-0 with 10 minutes remaining. But really, it is all about the rugby today, and that humiliation, as it's been described, for Ireland in Tokyo. The game really done and dusted inside half an hour, by which time the All Blacks have scored 3 tries. Mistake after mistake been punished by New Zealand, and Ireland yet again head out at the quarter-final stage. 53106 is the text number at Off the Ball. We're live on all our social channels. Keith Wood is on the line. Afternoon, Keith.
Hi, Nathan. How are you doing?
So, yet again, the quarterfinals have done for Ireland. 46-14. The All Blacks were at times brilliant, but Ireland, the sheer amount of mistakes that they made individually, collectively, it's probably going to haunt this side for a long time.
I think it will. And I think when you look back on it, we were still a bit flat, didn't show energy, don't seem to have the pace of some of the other teams. I know that sounds kind of unusual when we know that we've been on are in very good positions over the last couple of years. And I think when you end up looking at this game, you end up saying, well, okay, do I look at just today? Do I look at what's happened in the past? You know, do I look at what's going to happen in the future? And you get caught between all of them. And I think there is a recognition that for some of the players, it's the end of the road. For the coach, it is, because he's moving on. For the captain, he's moving on. They've had phenomenal days in the past in a green jersey. They just didn't have one of those days today, and it comes across as it was chastening to watch. I thought the All Blacks were phenomenal, and I really did. I thought they played an incredibly simplistic game, and it's one of the things that when I chat to kids when they go to play, their basic skills are of such an incredible standard that they work under pressure and they work at 100 miles an hour. And when they have their mind right and they're given a bit of space under which to try and use it in that fashion, I mean, they're a joy to watch, just not a joy when you're wearing a green jersey, you know.
And those basic skills were something that cost Ireland on countless occasions today. The amount of individual handling errors, knock-ons, Sexton failing to find touch on several occasions. You kind of touched on it there. Was that down to All Blacks pressure, or was that sort of a culmination of everything we've seen from Ireland this year, where it just hasn't been quite right?
Yeah, I actually think it's both, and a lot of people have been saying, a lot of pundits, a lot of fans have been saying, look, we peaked in 2018 and we've been on a slide since then. We've definitely been on a confident slide since then, but equally, the game has changed quite a lot. Even in that last 12 months, it's quite interesting how, and especially during this World Cup, and you can see it, the teams that play at 1,000,000 miles an hour and have real gas in their side, like real gas, they are, they're streets ahead, you know, and they're taking some of the risks, but their skills are standing up to scratch. I didn't think we put New Zealand under a huge amount of pressure today. So they were able to go and use their simple skills, simple tip-ons, simple pullbacks, but they played at almost 100% efficiency. And we really didn't. We were under huge pressure all the time. I mean, there was a couple of things that stood out for me today. I took notes, which I rarely do watching a match, but that they almost ignored Conor Murray and they almost ignored Johnny Sexton when they had the ball. And they said those guys aren't going to make that break, or they're not going to have that cut, because there was a flood of defenders to hit 12 and 13. There was a flood to hit the ball carriers. You know, they were kind of leaving gaps and making calculated guesses time after time. And I mean, that is as good as I've seen New Zealand play in I would say since the last World Cup. They had a sustained level of almost perfection for the game. That's impossible. And it's a lonely place, by the way. If you're wearing a green jersey on that field and you're not managing to hit your stripes, and you see this happening, you're almost powerless to try and do it. So that's tough.
It's interesting what you talk about there and over the last year and how the game has moved on and the speed and the pace that certain teams play with. And it comes back again to, it feels as though Ireland are in a very similar place to where they were a year ago in terms of tactics and style, but confidence, they're nowhere near that level. Does that suggest again that Joe Schmidt should have done something quite different, that actually he should have used that All Blacks victory as almost an end point to take the confidence out of that, but to rethink things for a final 12-month cycle?
I think that's a really easy thing to say in retrospect. And I know some people have been saying it beforehand. I don't know that it's as simple as that, actually. I really don't. And I think for Ireland to play, I think we got it fully exposed against Japan, right, a couple of weeks ago. And that is watching a team that has plotted that for 4 years and has taken 250 days together to try and say this is exactly how we're going to play. They have entirely different ramifications for doing that or not. If Ireland had changed up everything and don't perform at all in the Six Nations, and I know we didn't have a good Six Nations, but if we lost everything, that is a huge knock-on. So I think these things have to happen in almost a mindset change for a coach to do it. I don't know if that could have happened in the last year. I think there may have been a change of players. I did think we had a conservative selection for this game, and that may have offered a bit of a change, but whether it would have offered the right change, I don't know. I mean, I feel for the guys. I feel for Rory coming off the field. Actually, I know what that feels like too, which is pretty horrendous. And you don't get a chance to try and rectify it. That's another big frustration when you hang up your boots.
Is a World Cup, as you touch on that, Keith, is a World Cup exit different to any other type of defeat? As you say, there is no tomorrow with this. For a lot of players, a 4-year cycle will begin and they know they won't be there at the end of it. Mentally, is it the hardest type of defeat to take?
I put it on the same level as losing a Lions series. It's a very lonely place, actually, at the end of it, because they may be a once in a lifetime opportunity, and it becomes incredibly difficult to be able to take. So I have huge sympathy for the players, it's interesting when you look back, and I have huge sympathy for Joe Schmidt, by the way, and that's why I said at the very start, I think we need to look at the past, we need to look at today, and we need to look at the future. And I think of what he has given us over the last number of years. He is, by every statistic that we have, the most successful Irish coach. He has today comes a cropper at a quarterfinal like all the other coaches, with the exception of Warren Gatland, and we didn't get out of the group that time in '99 when I played in that game in Lens, which was dreadful. That was a lonely place, I can tell you that too. But we look back at what has happened and we say, yes, this is fantastic. And what happened today tarnishes it today. And after today, we have to look back and say, okay, but look at what some of these guys have achieved over that period of time. Look at what our coaches achieved over that period of time. Do we then go and look into the future and say, how can we go still do well in Six Nations, which is our bread and butter, and we absolutely need it. It actually funds our whole game in Ireland. So how do we do well in the Six Nations over the next few years, and how do we get to a point where we peak at a World Cup and get that right? Because I can tell you that back in the past, with the exception of the last two World Cups, for the two World Cups before that, it was said that the All Blacks peaked in the middle of it. They didn't quite get their timing right. Well, they seem to have got their timing right today, because they were phenomenal today. So, but that's a much longer play. But that just shows you, I think it shows you the amount of difficulty that there is there to have in rugby. It isn't just as simple as we all like to think that it is, that you can actually put all your eggs into one basket. It doesn't work like that. But that doesn't take away from how unbelievably disappointing today was, and disheartening today was.
And part of the disappointment is that this has been seen, and rightly so, as the most well-resourced Irish squad. That actually they've had this continuity of coach from the last World Cup. They have total control of their players, of playing minutes. We rarely, if ever, see many of these top players playing in the Pro 14, that they were well rested, they were fresh, yet still we're in this exact same position of losing a World Cup quarter-final. I know it's hard to put your finger on exactly what went wrong, and maybe we'll never fully know, but when you look over the last year, what mistakes do you think Joe Schmidt made?
That's a very pointed question in the manner in which you've put it. The build-up was okay, though the end of it was very pointed. I felt we looked jaded. We haven't looked sharp. We haven't looked sharp on this World Cup. We seem to be confident against Scotland, but Scotland were absolutely abject. And after that, we just didn't seem to be sharp at all. And there was times we did really good things. There was times we didn't do good things. But there, I don't know. We look shook for an awful lot of it. I have that down on a couple of my elements. Our discipline. Our discipline goes when you're under huge pressure. So I don't get kind of. But we look shell shocked for large parts of that game, and a lot of that is to do with the pace as well. But I don't know. Within the last year. And it is the point, and the questions will be asked anyway. Are some of these guys too old? Have they been there too long? Are we relying too much on it? And I think there's elements of truth in it, but there's also a view that Joe would have looked at those players and said, they have delivered for me in the past, and when the pressures come on, they have delivered for me. And that's the stall he decided to go and take. And you would have still expected a higher level of performance from them today. And we didn't perform anywhere near as well. So that's where the hindsight stuff comes in. Because you could easily say, let's bring in 5 new guys. That's not the right thing to do a lot of the time. 6 weeks out from a World Cup, that doesn't quite happen in that fashion either. But I thought we were one-paced today. And I thought they looked as if they had a whole variety of different gears they could go up when they wanted to.
And all those sort of individual errors that were made today, and again, you go back to so many knock-ons at crucial times, and even that third try in the mix-up between Sexton and Carney. Do you put all that down to the sort of fatigue, that jaded feel around the squad?
Yeah, it's. I think a huge amount is down to pressure. That game today was played at a monumental pace. Come ruck time, Aaron Smith was just zipping the ball away. It was there waiting for him. Every time he got there, it was ready for him to go. There was no digging for a ball at any stage. That pace puts everybody under pressure. It really, really does. And we just didn't seem to be operating at that speed. And so jaded is a word because I felt we have other teams are looking to play at a far, far faster pace. I don't know that we're not trying to play at that pace, but the one-out runners doesn't lead to very, very fast, unless you do it the way New Zealand did it, which is taking a pass, maybe a tip-on pass, but getting over the gain line, because they're doing it when the ball is so fast you'd expect it to go to the backs, but it goes to the forwards. They're running onto the ball. They're running onto a defensive line that is trying to get back into an onside position, so that you lose that hard press that we often talk about. I mean, we were exposed by the speed of the game today. And I'll go back to what I said earlier on. It's a joy to watch a team play at that pace and with that level of skill. Their basic skills, their basic handling skills under pressure of the All Blacks, the speed at which they pass, the ease with which they pass, forwards, backs, doesn't seem to matter, is something that they are better at than anybody else in the world anyway, maybe with the exception of Japan. I think Japan are nearly there in terms of their handling capability, but not at the speed that they're playing at. I mean, it was imperious rugby. I mean, it was a joy to watch. It just wasn't a joy to watch as an Irish has-been or as an Irish fan. You're looking at that and you're saying, God, this is just hard to watch. And then you're still saying, wow, that's a joy. And you see Dane Cole come off the bench and throw a ball to nothing, knowing that there'll be a guy running there. That's that's still phenomenal rugby, But it's just a really hard day then to go and watch and say, well, we had dreams for it. So we said beforehand Ireland might win by 2 or 3 points or lose by 20, because that was the. But we were hoping for New Zealand not to come as sharp as they were. But that's the sharpest I've seen them for 4 years.
What you were talking about there, about their approach to Conor Murray and Jonathan Sexton, and Jonathan Sexton is still the current World Player of the Year for another couple of weeks anyways, but was in that position rightly, and it was seen that Ireland had the best half-back partnership probably in the world a year ago. The fact that the All Blacks almost stood off them, does that suggest that they didn't feel they were the threat they were 12 months ago, or was it that actually they felt they could really make hay against Ringrose and Henshaw?
Well, if you look at even 12 months ago, we would play through a series of phases, get ourselves into a good position, and then there'd be a play that would be done on it. And by chasing after Johnny, that would leave a gap. So even if you got the hit in on him, that would leave a gap for somebody else to go through. That's what they'd read this time. So they're saying, let him go. We know that if he runs across the field like that, we don't have to follow him. And we can actually put somebody else to go on the guy outside him, and we keep one guy on the inside. And that happened 3 or 4 times today, and we never got through those phases. We didn't hold on to the ball long enough to play the style of play that we have been playing for the last number of years. So, of course, he's a threat, but the one of the main reasons he's a threat is he drops people into a hole. He's opening up holes in the defensive line. He wasn't allowed to open up any today, and even the one that nearly opened, he got smashed just on the giving of the ball, which led to Bowden Barrett's trying the corner.
You can stay in the line, Keith, or you're more than free to go, because Zinzan Brooke has joined us on the line. It's totally up to you.
I'll stay where I am.
I'll stay where I am,
of course, yeah.
Zinzan, thanks a lot for taking the call. Congratulations, firstly.
Pleasure. Thank you very much.
A very happy New Zealand right now, I'd imagine. This was a game that had been built up for quite a while. There was a feeling probably a year ago this may well end up being a World Cup final. Were you surprised by the manner of the score in the end?
Yes, probably in reflection, yes, but I did sort of forecast that you were going to get a emphatic response from the Blacks. They've obviously, in a way, which I think I said that earlier on in the beginning of the week, that Ireland have actually helped reset our dial, and the All Blacks would have totally respected what Ireland have done in the past, and you don't get to number one in the world easily. So when you set yourself a reputation like that, there, you got to try and live up to it. And unfortunately, Ireland were just on a receiving end and a very motivated All Black side that delivered and executed. And I'll take the words off Woody as well, that I've never seen the All Blacks play that well for that period of time. Yes, they probably had a little bit of a wobble. A slight wobble towards the end, but that first 40 minutes was just absolutely sublime.
Yeah, you're very much echoing, I think, what Keith was saying about the standard of that All Blacks performance. And when you talk about the pace of the game, it's a real credit, I guess, again, to Steve Hansen, who could have looked back on last year's defeat to Ireland and thought, all right, listen, it's the end of a long, hard season. It's a one-off game. We'll go back. We'll regroup. It actually feels as though that did spark a big change in him. I think there was 7 changes from the side that started in Dublin last year for the team today. Yeah. And also, the pace and intensity of that side, that it did spark a complete overhaul of how the All Blacks were probably approaching the last year.
Yeah, respectfully, that and that's what you need to do if you. And that would have been the strategy for not only the management side, but for an experienced All Black team that have a lot of players that have big reputations, and they don't want to get that ruined in a couple of games. But that for me was, and I was anticipating that was going to be not so much the root rugby, but the way that they actually controlled and the clinical performance in every aspect of the game here. There was very minimal mistakes through that period of time here, and I was anticipating that would have been a little bit of a wobble from the Blacks in the first 20 minutes, but they held it and sustained the pressure for the whole of that first 40 minutes, and then they continued just straight after half time. So when you put a marker down like that there, and it just seemed too the bounce of the ball and the rub of the green went the All Black way. You know, the tiny little mistakes. You know, like Conor Murray. I know it's only a small thing, but it counts as the consequences of how it unfolded when he just knocked that ball down when he was taking it from I think it was from Henderson, the lock, and then just gave the possession away. But look, let's you know, the great thing is you've got two amazing people, Joe Smith and Bestie. So, you know, one is the coach and one is a guy who's just going to retire. But you know, he's both of them are fantastic. Their contribution in the last 3 to 4 years has absolutely just been emphatic and a great response. And Hansen acknowledged that through his chat afterwards the game, which is very respectful.
Keith, it is hard to have a reasoned discussion about Joe Schmidt and Rory Best right now, and you touched on it, that we can probably over the next couple of weeks look back in the last decade of Joe Schmidt and the influence he's had on Irish rugby from Leinster through to the success with Ireland, because right now what's fresh in our minds is the last 4 weeks in it where it hasn't quite happened. But he's going to feel it more than anybody. I think he's said it in his post-match press conference, which we'll hear shortly, like the scar of this for Joe Schmidt is going to last a long, long time.
Well, it is. I mean, and you'd often say it, who'd want to be a coach? And I never wanted to be a coach for the very simple reason that the losses, of which I had too many, I will comfortably say, in my career, but I felt every single one of them keenly, you know, and it's incredibly tough. And like, I think over the next few weeks we'll have proper conversations on what he has done, on the changes that he has wrought onto Irish rugby, on some of the mistakes that were made as well. I think when you look back on it, you don't just look at the glory days, and you look at some of the other things and the lessons that will have to be learned going forward. We also have Farrell as one of our coaches presently, who will be the head coach. Well, he's now the head coach, pretty much. And so he is going to have to pick up, and he's going to feel it very keenly. So what changes does he make? I know that some fans think, well, God, is going to be more of the same. Well, it won't be, because each head coach will have a different view on how it should happen, how things should go, whether it is as detail-oriented or whether it is more instinctive, or whatever it might be. You know that there'll be a different thing that'll come from this. You can't get past today for feeling how bad, however bad we feel, it's how bad are all those guys feeling. You know, I always think you need to go to a human side of it. They want, like, everything that they have done for the period of time is to try and get us to get the win. And we didn't get it. And we got eviscerated, actually, by an All Black team that hit every single strap.
Zinzan, I guess we never know how great a team is until a World Cup comes around and they get to prove themselves on these huge occasions where it is very much do or die. And there have been comparisons, of course, made with the 2011 team and the 2015 team, and because of maybe how the preparation went and some of the performances against Australia and South Africa, there were question marks over this All Black side. Does a performance like today quash all those questions and mean that you head into England next week feeling that this is another special crop of All Black players?
No, I think they'll dust themselves off and they'll want to go again here. I don't think there won't be any court sessions at this stage after this performance here, because I watched the game with England this morning, and that was very comprehensive. It was that was well executed, and that England side here, and it's all about that timing and that running. And at the moment, I'd say that there's a confidence within that England camp, and Eddie Jones and his team have done a fantastic job. But the All Blacks won't make the mistake, and I'm sure England won't do it here. They'll actually prepare themselves for a full-on. This for me, I would have anticipated that potentially should have been the final, just on the form of what I've seen in these games. But with Wales and South Africa and Japan and the French, who knows? Because we haven't seen the French turn up as of yet, and they always do turn up at the World Cup, as the All Blacks will know. We've had a couple of times we've had our pants pulled down, and France have, I think they've been in 3 finals, if I'm not mistaken. And look, it's fantastic. But the All Blacks will just focus on. This is just one part of the jigsaw that we put in place. There's two more to go, and to be recognised in the world of rugby, and you only remember it at the end when you win it. These guys here are a long way from doing that at this moment.
Zinzan, thanks a lot for taking the call. Enjoy the celebrations.
Cheers, thank you. Cheers.
Well done, Zinny.
Thanks, Woody.
Keith, just a couple of more questions before we let you go. Firstly, about that semi-final next weekend then between New Zealand and England, and it feeling like the de facto final in a way, that these may well be the two best teams in the competition. England's performance this morning against Australia in comparison to what New Zealand did against Ireland?
It's not like what's like, but I thought England were very excellent again this morning. They have gone for for the All Blacks, when you look at it, and it's all about skill and precision and pure pace. England have gone for a high level of precision, but they've gone for a lot of big battering as well, and they picked a very, very physical team. Again, I thought it was a really, really good game of rugby that almost hinged on a few different things just not going Australia's way. Australia were and have been well off the mark for about 4 years, but they've a phenomenal history in the Rugby World Cup of being able to overachieve at different times. That's why I wouldn't be betting against them for that game this morning. But I thought England showed a really high level of maturity. I thought they were very efficient and very, very clinical. And they took their chances really well. And so I thought it was a great game. I think it opens up to a phenomenal semi-final, and it'll be interesting to see what manner of play. But I mean, it's, if New Zealand can back up how they played today and play in a similar fashion, they're hard to play. They're going to be really hard to play against.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see England's team selection as well and what Eddie Jones does. Like Henry Slade coming in. Do you think that his performance means that he doesn't really have much to think about, or because of New Zealand's style of play, do you want that dual playmaker of George Ford coming back in?
I think he picked horses for courses, and I think he was afraid of Karevi and Kurabati coming straight down into that channel in on top of George Ford. He still brought George Ford on with 25 to go. So I think he may revert back to the one that he's had all along. But also it gives them an additional option. I know it was mentioned in commentary, and you could see it a couple of times, but that when England scored at the start, the first guy to them in his training bib was George Ford, so I think at times we still get caught too much into reading what's the starting 15. The sense of team here is 23 or maybe even 31.
You touched on it right at the start, I think, about the cycle of a World Cup and where Ireland fit in with that, and the practicalities of having to be competitive as Six Nations in terms of funding the game within Ireland. And we can't just, it feels, write off a Six Nations. And probably from Andy Farrell's point of view, looking ahead already, he certainly can't write off a Six Nations, his first one, because Irish rugby right now feels like it's at a low point. He's very much associated with that and with the Joe Schmidt era, that I presume from his point of view, he needs to go in all guns blazing to this Six Nations. Whatever about blooding for the future, he needs to have a winning team probably right from the off.
Well, he'd like that, and you like a honeymoon period, but that's wishful thinking for the most part. But the view will be whether he puts a stamp on it in terms of selection. He's trying to bring some guys through. So Joe Schmidt brought a huge number of guys through in the last few years. I mean, the big difference from 4 years ago to now is he blooded a colossal number of players. The other difference is he didn't maybe use them. So I'm laughing looking at Steve Hansen's selection during the week, and I'm saying, okay, you pick Goodhue in the centre, and you drop Ryan Crotty off the whole squad, and Ben Smith doesn't get picked at 15 or on the wing, and he's gone from the squad. And I'm saying, my God almighty, every other team would kill to have those guys in their ranks and on the field. So that's it was a different philosophy. For the young guys that he gave their head to today, they were phenomenal. Goodhue had a really, really good 60 minutes. and having Bowden Barrett at 15 he's absolutely lethal at 15, and it goes down to that different sense, and they have far more strength and depth in New Zealand, and maybe that builds a bit of additional confidence in them, that maybe those guys' skill set, even if they've only a few caps to their name, is still of a standard that they can always trust. So what's Farrell going to do? I don't quite know.
That does feel like the most peculiar part almost of the last 4 years, that, as you say, I don't know how many times we've spoken this show about building up depth of talent in Irish rugby, and Joe Schmidt bringing players into the squad, giving players minutes here and there, but when it came to it, just not quite trusting to throw them in at a World Cup.
Yeah, I think some of that goes on the players, if I'm honest. You know, if a guy's putting his hand up saying pick me, pick me, pick me all the time by his performance, you would hope he'd get picked. So there's been a lot of criticism early on from whether Rory Best should be actually going. He's 37 years of age. He was being picked because he was playing better than anybody else. Still think that's pretty hard on a guy at 37 with the pace of the game that was there today. Like it was incredibly tough for him. But other people have to put their hands up too. So the coach's job is to pick the best players at his disposal, and if there's other people that are pushing that standard, then they're going to get picked. So I think we did end up with a lot of players blooded, but I'd like to have seen a bit of more of a spark from some of the younger guys coming through. So I don't know. Look, a lot of this is in retrospect. We can bitch and moan like anybody. We have that,
and we will.
We have that down pat when we need to, Nathan. You know, but I would still go back to the human side of this. There's a lot of guys here. We're fans, but there's a lot of guys here who've put their dreams and 4 years of their life into success, and they didn't get it today. So they're going to be in a pretty lonely spot.
All right, Keith, good stuff. I'm sure we'll chat to you again later in the week when you've had probably another chance to watch it back, if you can put yourself through it.
Not likely, I'd say, Nathan. I don't want to watch it again.
All right, Keith, thanks a lot for taking the call.
Cheers.
Keith Wood there on Saturday's Off the Ball. So that is Ireland 14, New Zealand 46, the final score in the World Cup quarter-final. We're going to bring you the press conference with Joe Schmidt a little bit later on. We're going to hear from some of the Irish players as well. Just to let you know, though, that the next Off the Ball Roadshow is right around the corner. This coming Wednesday, we're going to be live in Cork. We're going to be at Crane Lane with British and Irish line David Wallace, former Ireland international Fiona Steed, ex-referee John Lacey, and it'll be a family affair as we're joined by two generations of the Myler family. David and his dad John are going to be bringing the Corkness to the occasion. It is now completely sold out, but keep an eye on offtheball.com/events so that you will have a fairly good idea of when and where we're going to be over the coming months. We'll obviously be picking through the pieces once again of Ireland's defeat to the All Blacks. If you missed it, England also through to the semi-final. They beat Australia by 40 points to 16. And in the Premier League, a much needed win for Everton. They beat West Ham by 2-0. Bernard in the first half, and then a wonder goal from Gylfi Sigurdsson in injury time from 35 yards out straight into the top corner. It's a busy afternoon in the Premier League. There's 6 games getting underway at 3 o'clock. I'm going to bring you through the team news for them next.
Off the Ball on News Talk.